A Good Man is Hard to Find. The Avon Book of Modern Writing, 1953. About the story. A Good Man is Hard to Find is a Southern Gothic short story first published in 1953 by author Flannery O'Connor who, in her own words, described it as the story of a family of six which, on its way driving to Florida, from Georgia, gets wiped out by an escaped convict who calls himself the Misfit. Put on your headphones and enjoy the story.
Well, first you and Bobby Lee get him and that little boy to step over yonder with you, the Misfit said, pointing to Bailey and John Wesley. The boys want to ask you something, he said to Bailey. Would you mind stepping back in the woods there with them? Listen, Bailey began, we're in a terrible predicament. Nobody realizes what this is, and his voice cracked. His eyes were as blue and intense as the parrots in his shirt and he remained perfectly still. The grandmother reached up to adjust her hat brim as if she were going to the woods with him, but it came off in her hand. She stood staring at it and after a second she let it fall on the ground. Hiram pulled Bailey up by the arm as if he were assisting an old man. John Wesley caught hold of his father's hand and Bobby Lee followed. They went off toward the woods and just as they reached the dark edge, Bailey turned and supporting himself against a gray naked pine trunk, he shouted, I'll be back in a minute, Mama, wait on me. Come back this instant, his mother shrilled but they all disappeared into the woods. Bailey boy, the grandmother called in a tragic voice but she found she was looking at the Misfit squatting on the ground in front of her. I just know you're a good man, she said desperately. You're not a bit common. No'm, I ain't a good man, the Misfit said after a second as if he had considered her statement carefully, but I ain't the worst in the world neither. My daddy said I was a different breed of dog from my brothers and sisters. You know, Daddy said, it's some that can live their whole life out without asking about it and it's others has to know why it is, and this boy is one of the latters. He's going to be into everything. He put on his black hat and looked up suddenly and then away deep into the woods as if he were embarrassed again. I'm sorry I don't have on a shirt before you ladies, he said, hunching his shoulders slightly. We buried our clothes that we had on when we escaped and we're just making do until we can get better. We borrowed these from some folks we met, he explained. That's perfectly all right, the grandmother said. Maybe Bailey has an extra shirt in his suitcase. I'll look and see directly, the Misfit said. Where are they taking him? The children's mother screamed. Daddy was a card himself, the Misfit said. You couldn't put anything over on him. He never got in trouble with the authorities though. Just had the knack of handling them. You could be honest too if you'd only try, said the grandmother. Think how wonderful it would be to settle down and live a comfortable life and not have to think about somebody chasing you all the time. The Misfit kept scratching in the ground with the butt of his gun as if he were thinking about it. Yes'm, somebody is always after you, he murmured. The grandmother noticed how thin his shoulder blades were just behind his hat because she was standing up looking down on him. Do you ever pray? She asked. He shook his head. All she saw was the black hat wiggle between his shoulder blades. No, he said. There was a pistol shot from the woods, followed closely by another. Then silence. The old lady's head jerked around. She could hear the wind move through the treetops like a long satisfied insuck of breath. Bailey boy, she called. I was a gospel singer for a while, the Misfit said. I've been most everything. Been in the armed service, both land and sea, at home and abroad, been twict married, been an undertaker, been with the railroads, plowed Mother Earth, been in a tornado, seen a man burnt alive onset, and he looked up at the children's mother and the little girl who were sitting close together, their faces white and their eyes glassy. I even seen a woman flogged, he said. Pray, pray, the grandmother began, pray, pray. Quote. I never was a bad boy that I remember of, the Misfit said in an almost dreamy voice, but somewheres along the line I done something wrong and got sent to the penitentiary. I was buried alive, and he looked up and held her attention to him by a steady stare. That's when you should have started to pray, she said. What did you do to get sent to the penitentiary that first time? Turn to the right, it was a wall, the Misfit said, looking up again at the cloudless sky. Turn to the left, it was a wall. Look up, it was a ceiling, look down, it was a floor. I forget what I done, lady. I sat there, trying to remember what it was I done and I ain't recalled it to this day. Onset in a while, I would think it was coming to me, but it never come. Maybe they put you in by mistake, the old lady said vaguely. No, he said. It wasn't no mistake. They had the papers on me. You must have stolen something, she said. The misfit sneered slightly. Nobody had nothing I wanted, he said. It was a head doctor at the penitentiary said what I had done was kill my daddy, but I known that for a lie. My daddy died in 1919 of the epidemic flu and I never had a thing to do with it. He was buried in the Mount Hopewell Baptist churchyard and you can go there and see for yourself. If you would pray, the old lady said, Jesus would help you. That's right, the misfit said. Well then, why don't you pray? She asked, trembling with delight suddenly. I don't want no help, he said. I'm doing all right by myself. Bobby Lee and Hiram came ambling back from the woods. Bobby Lee was dragging a yellow shirt with bright blue parrots in it. Throw me that shirt, Bobby Lee, the misfit said. The shirt came flying at him and landed on his shoulder and he put it on. The grandmother couldn't name what the shirt reminded her of. No, lady, the misfit said while he was buttoning it up, I found out the crime don't matter. You can do one thing or you can do another, kill a man or take a tire off his car, because sooner or later you're going to forget what it was you done and just be punished for it. The children's mother had begun to make heaving noises as if she couldn't get her breath. Lady, he asked, would you and that little girl like to step off yonder with Bobby Lee and Hiram and join your husband? Yes, thank you, the mother said faintly. Her left arm dangled helplessly and she was holding the baby, who had gone to sleep, in the other. Help that lady up, Hiram, the misfit said as she struggled to climb out of the ditch, and Bobby Lee, you hold onto that little girl's hand. I don't want to hold hands with him, Junestar said. He reminds me of a pig. The fat boy blushed and laughed and caught her by the arm and pulled her off into the woods after Hiram and her mother. Alone with the misfit, the grandmother found that she had lost her voice. There was not a cloud in the sky nor any sun. There was nothing around her but woods. She wanted to tell him that he must pray. She opened and closed her mouth several times before anything came out. Finally she found herself saying, Jesus. Jesus, meaning, Jesus will help you, but the way she was saying it, it sounded as if she might be cursing. Yes'm, the misfit said as if he agreed. Jesus shown everything off balance. It was the same case with him as with me except he hadn't committed any crime and they could prove I had committed one because they had the papers on me. Of course, he said, they never shown me my papers. That's why I sign myself now. I said long ago, you get you a signature and sign everything you do and keep a copy of it. Then you'll know what you done and you can hold up the crime to the punishment and see do they match and in the end you'll have something to prove you ain't been treated right. I call myself the misfit, he said, because I can't make what all I done wrong fit what all I gone through in punishment. There was a piercing scream from the woods, followed closely by a pistol report. Does it seem right to you, lady, that one is punished a heap and another ain't punished at all? Jesus, the old lady cried. You've got good blood. I know you wouldn't shoot a lady. I know you come from nice. Pray. Jesus, you ought not to shoot a lady. I'll give you all the money I've got. Lady, the misfit said, looking beyond her far into the woods, there never was a body that give the undertaker a tip. There were two more pistol reports and the grandmother raised her head like a parched old turkey hen crying for water and called, Bailey boy, as if her heart would break. Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, the misfit continued, and he shouldn't have done it. He shown everything off balance. If he did what he said, then it's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him, and if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best way you can by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure but meanness, he said and his voice had become almost a snarl. Maybe he didn't raise the dead, the old lady mumbled, not knowing what she was saying and feeling so dizzy that she sank down in the ditch with her legs twisted under her. I wasn't there so I can't say he didn't, the misfit said. I wished I had a been there, he said, hitting the ground with his fist. It ain't right I wasn't there because if I had a been there I would have known. Listen lady, he said in a high voice, if I had a been there I would have known and I wouldn't be like I am now. His voice seemed about to crack and the grandmother's head cleared for an instant. She saw the man's face twisted close to her own as if he were going to cry and she murmured, why you're one of my babies. You're one of my own children. She reached out and touched him on the shoulder. The misfit sprang back as if a snake had bitten him and shot her 3 times through the chest. Then he put his gun down on the ground and took off his glasses and began to clean them. Hiram and Bobby Lee returned from the woods and stood over the ditch, looking down at the grandmother who half sat and half lay in a puddle of blood with her legs crossed under her like a child's and her face smiling up at the cloudless sky. Without his glasses, the misfit's eyes were red-rimmed and pale and defenseless looking. Take her off and throw her where you shown the others, he said, picking up the cat that was rubbing itself against his leg. She was a talker, wasn't she? Bobby Lee said, sliding down the ditch with a yodel. She would have been a good woman, the misfit said, if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. Some fun. Bobby Lee said. Shut up, Bobby Lee, the misfit said. It's no real pleasure in life.